Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski. Today, I am very, very excited to be joined by Nat Cassidy. Nat Cassidy is an award-winning actor, playwright, novelist, and director, as well as a sandwich-winning musician. He lives in New York City. Welcome, Nat.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We were just talking for a few minutes offline, but now we're going to have the formal conversation. As much as I don't think the listeners, they're like, hey, Boston, New York City. Hey, they're fun. fun cities. We could do a whole geographical podcast, but we are here to talk about your debut novel, Mary. So even though this is your debut novel, you've worked in the arts for quite some time. So can you talk a little bit about your career and the path that led you to writing this book specifically?
Sure. Oof, a long and sordid tale.
We're getting right right off the bat. There you go.
I'll leave out all the really disreputable bits. See if I can do it concisely. The Reader's Digest version is I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and from like the age of 5 or 6, I have always been an actor. My background is in classical theater and like Shakespeare specifically. So I've been doing that since I was a tiny, precocious little child actor. And did that through college, and that's what I majored in University of Arizona. And then I moved to New York as an actor. And was kicking around doing that for a few years, wound up really not enjoying doing like classical theater specifically as a profession. I was just finding it like very classist and elitist, and it's also just kind of eventually the novelty wears thin when you're doing the same like 37 plays over and over and over again. I did Hamlet 4 times. I did Midsummer 5 times. Like, it's just like, how many times?
Did you play different parts in each of them at least?
In Midsummer, yes. In Hamlet, it was mostly just Hamlet, which if you're going to repeat roles, that's a good
the
role
one to do it, but still.
Yeah, it was just getting a little samey. And so I decided to start writing plays too. I'd never I'd never tried my hand at writing plays, despite like living in play scripts for most of my life. And also I should say that this whole time, ever since I was a little kid, I've always just been obsessed with horror. I don't know if people can if there's a video feed or not, but
we will be releasing video.
Okay, then
your amazing bookcase,
notice.
Yes,
and it goes beyond frame too. It's
wow.
This is the truncated version. This is many apartments later when I've had to just jettison a lot of them, and they go two books deep also. So these are double stacked.
Wow.
So I've just always been obsessed with horror and horror literature, and I was always writing short stories and kind of abortive novels as a kid too. Always horror. I was obsessed with Stephen King, the Beatles, and Shakespeare. Those were like my 3 main tent poles. All of which is to say, when I started writing plays, naturally there were always horror plays, and so I started writing plays for the New York stage that were all like unapologetically horror, all grounded in kind of the language of horror and horror tropes and stuff like that. And my playwriting career took off way faster than my acting career, which I try not to take too personally. But so I started just kind of writing horror plays and producing horror plays and directing horror plays. And a few years later, I should say it was about 10 years later, I started a podcast audio drama company with some friends who also had a lot of experience with they were also theater friends. They had a theater company that was primarily devoted to like sci-fi and other genre theater like that, and I was obsessed with horror theater and stuff like that, so we just kind of ran in very overlapping circles, and they really wanted to start an audio drama company. I really wanted to start working in audio drama, so we kind of joined forces and formed this company. And our first audio drama production is this audio drama called Steal the Stars, written by Mac Rogers, who's a brilliant playwright, brilliant audio dramatist. And this was a script that he wrote, like a 14-episode audio drama. It's like a doomed sci-fi noir romance sort of vibe. Yeah, it's great. It's really great. And we did this as a co-production with Tor Books. And Tor had like come and seen my shows, had come and seen Mac's shows. They were very familiar with us as playwrights, and they also wanted to get into the audio sphere. So they decided to do this co-production with us. And because it was being co-produced with Tor Books, they were like, we think we also want to do like a novelization of this story. Do you guys have any interest in being involved in that? And I was already kind of feeling the itch to now leave playwriting behind, because it was also just, you can only do playwriting for so long before you also go insane. And so I was like, I'll audition to, write the novelization. Basically, I had to write like a 20,000 word sample of how I would novelize it. And they were like, yeah, this is great. Like, this works really well. You have a good instinct for prose. And, that was because I kind of cut my teeth as a writer, writing short stories and novels and stuff like that. So it really felt like I was kind of going back to a language I'd always spoken as a kid. It was kind of like, this was my mother tongue all along. If you want to be really pretentious about it, and as I'm sometimes want to be.
Yeah, we all can indulge here.
Exactly.
Rightfully so.
What are we here to do if not indulge? So I wrote the novelization for Steal the Stars that was published by Tor. I actually like novelized it as Mac was writing the scripts. Mac was when I got the job to novelize it, I think Mac had written like 4 of the 14 episodes. And then from that point on, we were hitting the ground running because we wanted the novelization to come out concurrent with the final episode. So from like first draft to published draft, it was like a I want to say like a 3-month process.
Wow, very quick.
Insanely fast. Yeah. But it was great, and it was really fulfilling, and it was just, I found it so artistically satisfying. And it's a novelization of a podcast, so it's not like this book like flew off the shelves. It was very niche, but it wound up on some great end of the year lists and stuff like that. And it was just kind of a nice feeling of like, oh, maybe this is something I could do. Flash forward to Tor a couple of years later. I was speaking with them about some other proposals I had for original novels. And they were essentially like, hey, we're actually going to start a horror imprint. So if you want to submit one of these novels for that, we'd be game. And so that's as far as the business goes, that's kind of the cut and dry story of how Mary came to be. I put together a packet that was, again, like an outline in 20,000 words or something like that. And the timing was really fortuitous. And I had worked with this editor before, because she was one of the editors on Steal the Stars. And it just kind of clicked, like, almost unnervingly easy of like, yeah, we'll do Mary, as a Nightfire book. The process was a lot slower than Steal the Stars, as publishing is wont to be. And also the pandemic happened like right in the middle of it. So everything just kind of slammed to a stop. But I was able to kind of transition very smoothly from playwriting into being a novel writer. And I've kind of, semi-officially retired from playwriting now because I love writing books. And I've got my next book is I'm turning in hopefully the final draft in like a week or two.
Oh, very exciting.
Yeah, thank you. And I from all media, I kind of have a reputation for being aggressively prolific. So like I already have like a stack of like 5 other ideas now I've given to Nightfire of like, all right, which one can I do next? And hopefully they'll bite on one of those now that this current contract is up. That's the business answer, and the, I guess, hopefully equally interesting artistic answer is that I actually first wrote Mary as a 13-year-old. Like this was a book that I first wrote when I was around 13. And so there was something really exciting about this debut novel also being this book that I had like been carrying with me, despite really being a prolific writer. And, I've written like 20 original plays, full length, countless short plays, screenplays, teleplays, like all these things. But this one idea just like has been bugging me for so long. And so this was finally like an opportunity, appropriately enough, Mary is a homecoming story, and writing novels felt like a kind of homecoming in an artistic sense too. And it's set in Arizona, which is where I'm from. So there's just all these kind of like concentric circles of homecoming that were tied into the actual writing of this damn book that now I am free of. Now I never have to deal with it again, which is very satisfying in a way too. Very long and rambling answer, but that's
no,
that's
it was all very
it.
interesting. No, thank you for sharing. I mean, do you know if there was an instance when you were 13 that like got you interested in this story, or like what first sparked? Because that's kind of wild for a 13-year-old to think. I mean, you must have been a really cool. You're cool. You seem like a cool dude now. You must have been a really cool 13-year-old. So yeah, can you tell me?
At 13,
more?
yeah.
Oh, come on now.
I'm getting less cool as the years go by.
No, so tell me. Can you tell me more about like the original inspiration and like what that was like?
Totally. And in fact, I actually go into it in there's a forward and an afterword to the book that a lot of people have been responding really nicely to. So I think some people actually like that material more than the story itself, which is not a minority of people, but I feel like I've seen that response a lot of times, which is gratifying. I wrote both. I don't take favorites. But the story is actually, I think, pretty interesting. Because Mary, for those that don't know, it's an homage to Carrie. The titles rhyme on purpose. And Mary is all about kind of the flip side of Carrie, Stephen King's Carrie, in that it is about perimenopause and menopause. It's kind of about the flip side of the great hormonal shifts that humans go through. Instead of like puberty, it's about the other side of puberty. So I wrote it again as a 13-year-old, very precocious, trying to write a book about menopause, which I knew
great,
nothing about.
Wild,
but I did know about puberty because I was going through it at the time, and I was already kind of obsessed with Carrie. I've had like a lifelong sort of, I don't know, I guess you'd call it a relationship with Carrie as a story. I go into in the foreword of the book when I was probably like 7 or 8. I was raised by a horror obsessed mom, and I was also horror obsessed, and so I used to just like walk up and down the Blockbuster aisle in the horror section, just like looking at horror movie cover art and just being fascinated and horrified by what these movies could be about, because the artwork was so striking. Often had nothing to do with the movie itself even, but like I would just kind of spin these tales of what these movies could be. And Carrie, the De Palma Carrie, can I curse on this?
Yes, of course.
Carrie fucked me up. Carrie fucked me up royally.
Me too. I think I was, how old were you when you saw it?
I didn't see the movie for a little while, but I was like 7 when I saw the image, and it was
it was,
it was just like Sissy Spacek, eyes wide,
incredible, like iconic image. Yes,
yeah. I probably saw the movie like 2 years later or something like that, at like 9 or something like that, and
I think I was like,
it didn't mess me up as much as the. Yeah, that's the perfect age to see it. Really.
Yeah.
But like the art was the thing that like really like just burrowed into my brain,
as it rightfully should. I mean,
it's so striking, and I think the reason why it did was because it's so different than like the monsters and ghouls and like things like that on the other one. You could tell that this woman was going through something horrifying. Like,
was your first exposure? Sorry to interrupt you. Was your first exposure the movie then, and then did you ever read the book or the novella?
I did. I should say I'm a Stephen King obsessive.
Because both when you say Stephen King, it's like the canon. It's at some point it's kind of hard to separate because he's had such a big influence on some of his movies, and then they deviate in some places. But I feel like they both are pretty similar for the most part. Yeah,
it was. I think the first Stephen King book I read, I would have been around 9 years old, 9 or 10, and that was Pet Sematary. But since then, I've read everything he's ever published, usually at least 2 times. Yeah, to not sound too insane, I kind of consider myself like an acolyte or a student of Stephen King. Like, it's ever since I was again around like 9 or 10 years old, it was just like I was obsessed with figuring out why his stories work and how his books work, how his narrative voice works. It was just like always like something I was very obsessive with.
Fortunately for you, there's like a ton of, it just keeps on coming too. So it's kind of like your obsession can never die, and it just keeps evolving. So that's pretty crazy.
Knock on wood. I hope he's still got a few more in him. Although I had mixed feelings about fairy tales, but that can be a
I
conversation.
haven't read it. I was gonna say, but then he has Joe Hill, and then he has, he's gonna pass on the legacy. So it's just
Mhm.
gonna get the King family. We'll keep on.
Yeah,
He's the king.
Joe is
Yeah.
great. Owen is great too. Owen's stuff is actually really,
Yeah.
really good. But yeah. So I'd read before I wrote Mary. I had read as a 13-year-old, I should say. I had read Carrie several times. But since I first saw that cover and was kind of struck by the horror of the movie,
Hmm.
I used to, when I was a little kid, I would like talk to Carrie out loud because I was so scared of her.
Oh wow.
And I was a latchkey kid. I was raised by a single mom who was working. Um, and I used to like see Carrie everywhere, and I was just be like terrified that she was going to do something to me. And it got to the point where I ran to my mom for help, and I was like, how do I kill Carrie? How do I fight Carrie? What happens in the movie? And my mom actually told me the story of Carrie and what happens, and she framed it in such a way where she was like, actually, Carrie's not the bad guy. Carrie is like, she was bullied horrifically, and like, she doesn't want to get you. She's not out to get you. Like, she had a really rough life. And my mom, I should say, again, this is a bit of a spoiler for anyone who wants to read this wraparound material. But my mom was again, a single working mom. She had MS. She had a degenerative disease. She had an incredibly rough childhood. She was raising two kids in the 80s and 90s on a part-time income because she could only physically stand to work part-time because of her MS. So she'd always just had like a really rough life. And I could tell even at that age, like really connected with Carrie also, and was, she didn't say this, but years later, I could definitely intuit it that like, she probably would have loved to have turned the tables on the people that made life hard for her too.
Right.
Like she really connected with Carrie. And so she framed it in such a way that I was like, oh, I get it. I'd never encountered a story like that before, where like I was supposed to sympathize with this object of horror. And so when I started talking to Carrie as a little kid, I would kind of try and make friends with her. I would be like, please don't hurt me. I'll be your friend. Like I won't do to them what I won't do to you what they did to you. Yeah, it was ridiculous but poignant in a lot of ways. All of which is to say, when I was starting to write novels as like a 12 and 13-year-old, I knew I wanted, again, as a Stephen King obsessive, I wanted like my first novel to be kind of a wink to Carrie. And so I wanted it to be kind of different than Carrie. So I was like, what's the flip side of puberty? Oh, menopause. I knew it existed. Both my parents were in the medical profession. They were both PAs. So there were always medical textbooks around. And I was also big into reading those sort of things. I sound a bit like a serial killer as I talk about my interests as a child, duly stipulated. But so, I was just always kind of fascinated by the body and how the body works. And so I knew of menopause as just like an event. Also, my mom probably would have been starting perimenopause around this time. And we talked all the time. We had very like frank conversations and things like that. So she probably also let me in on some of what was happening. So that was kind of my impetus for writing this story. It was just going to be about basically what would happen if Carrie didn't have telekinesis, if she didn't have special powers, and she grew up isolated and bullied and very withdrawn. Would she still have a story to tell? That was kind of the thing I was interested in. And something happens when she's going through this other great hormonal shift that she kind of can get revenge on the people who have wronged her. And at the same time, I was also reading, I didn't just read Stephen King. I read every paperback pulpy horror novel I could find. And so I was also reading books like Ramsey Campbell's The Parasite, which is like a very metaphysical book. That one's all about like astral projection and stuff like that. And somewhere along the lines, I just kind of got into my head of like, oh, what if Mary was reincarnated? Like, what if she was a serial killer who was reincarnated? And that relationship kind of gives her the revenge that like Carrie would have gotten. And these all kind of like form together in a stew. And here's where I should definitely admit before anyone gets like impressed. When I say I wrote Mary as a 13-year-old, it was probably about 100 pages and it was garbage. Like it was just unreadable. There was no
But you
plot.
have the roots. I mean, that's really, it's all it takes is like a really good idea. And then I
Yeah.
think the maturation too, like the fact that I would, if anything that you had written at age 13 was plausible, I would have been like, okay, that kid maybe is a serial killer. But the fact that you were at least able to understand, like, you're going to get there someday, but it's just the sort of like, it was almost like too much. The fact that you're even able to grapple with those concepts. I mean, writing a novel, only 100 pages, like that's crazy. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. I wasn't a serial killer, but I did butcher the English language mercilessly. At that age, I was so obsessed with trying to sound like an adult writing that I would highlight every word almost. And then this was on like a very old word processor with word processing software, whatever you want to call it, old like Windows computer. I would shift F7 and shift F7 and shift F and just keep trying to find synonyms for things until it literally made no sense.
Just like
whatsoever.
read like a thesaurus. Weird.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to sound smart and I'm going to sound like an adult. At one point, this always sticks in my head. At one point, someone fell to the floor and I shift F7 so often and so many times that the final product was he metastasized to the floor. And I was like, what? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So that's a sense of my prose style at that age.
Wow.
But yeah, so that story just always, that premise always stuck with me. And again, it was just kind of a nice little fortuitous thing that I had this opportunity to write a debut novel. And I was like, well, shit, why not stick with the original plan and have this first novel be a kind of a wink and a nod to Carrie? Yeah.
I mean, it clearly meant something to you, the fact that you were able to hold on to it for so many years. Whoops. Little the makeshift podcast studio, aka my bedroom with the sun glare now.
I know it well. Yeah, I'm so jealous of the sun hitting your face.
I mean, it was raining the other day, but yes, I do live in beautiful Los Angeles where who knows what season it is. I do not. It's almost November. The concept of stories and the way that you've like held on to it and the importance for you, I think kind of manifests to you. Sorry to the just audio listeners only, but this is your reminder that we are on YouTube as well. I like to read pod. Your bookcase is incredibly impressive. And as someone who has traveled and moved a lot in my life, number one, reads a lot and just doesn't have the physical capacity. Like I just wish I could carry the thousands of books that I've read, but I just like don't have the space. And I also just like usually read the book once and then pass it on to somebody, or just, very, very often I usually don't reread it. Yeah. And so, God, the sun glare is like driving me insane. I'm sorry. I should have shut the blinds better, but as long as it's not driving you crazy, it's just like a sun.
Get that vitamin D. The sun sets now at 6 p.m.
I mean, it's gonna set. This is its setting. We'll see. That doesn't make it any better. Oh well, it's fun. It's like a little roller coaster for the visual viewers. So how long have you like had this collection for? What is sort of like the oldest piece in your collection, whether it's a memento or a book? And then how, do you absorb everything physically? Like I read everything pretty much on my Kindle because I love the library and that's where I get a lot of my books. Yeah. So I just have like I'm just like so fascinated, and it's so nice and refreshing too to see like a big, well-loved collection too, as opposed to some sort of like, no offense to those people out there, but those like bullshit, like color curated, like never been touched shelves. Like that's not a real books. Reader. Yeah, you're not a real reader. So I always started out with like, I'm only going to buy certain books and only have copies of certain things without people give them to me as gifts. And I just get now advanced reader copies, or, like people just want to give me their books and I'm like, thank you, but I have no space. So yeah, tell me about the collection. And then I'd love to know some anecdotes too about like what you love about physical media, how you consume books and literature, and some of like the oldest things in your collection.
Totally. Oh, I love these questions. I should say up front that having a collection this large really sucks. It's really like I can't part with it, but also having moved, I think this is my 10th or 11th apartment in New York or something like that. And
Hey, you also live in New York City. I mean, even though you're in
yeah,
Queens, you said it's like I
it's
don't
the
want to dox
worst.
you, but it's like
Yeah,
you're still part of the city, and you're not. I can't imagine you have a ton of square footage.
yeah. We're finally in an apartment that actually has like a decent, like a humane amount of space.
Good,
So I
good.
have like this is my office space in our apartment, and like I can
Are
actually
those
like
actual like
spread out.
bookshelves that you travel with, or are they built in?
These are IKEA Billy. Yeah, and I've
Wow.
had there's one more on this side of the wall on the same computer side, one more on this side, and then like one more that you can't see from
Wow. So
just
this is
me.
like just a third or like a
Mhm.
half of your collection. Wow.
Yeah, and this is pretty pared down from over the years
Well, I
too, because
imagine every time you have to move too, you probably have to
yeah, you gotta
make some cuts, unfortunately.
yeah, and it's usually inexplicable ones too, because like almost invariably after a move, like a few months later, I'll be like,
Yep.
where's this book? Like I couldn't have gotten rid of that
Yeah, you're
book,
like, I
but
kept this one, but not that one. Yeah,
yeah,
I totally
it's
get it.
bananas. But I moved here probably with like a suitcase or two
Yep,
of
I'm in the same
books. Yeah, and those are
situation.
still bopping around somewhere.
And are those
Um
from like your child dating back to your childhood, or like how long did you hold on? Wow, so you literally held on
yeah,
to them from when you were a child.
many of them are Stephen King books.
Oh
These
my
are Stephen
God.
King
So you
shelves, and
literally
these are
have the Stephen King. That is really
in
cute.
fact, this is jumping the gun a little bit as far as anecdotes go, but
I love anecdotes. Yes. Keep
uh,
them
then you've come to the right place. Right over
uh-huh.
there, I'm trying to
Top right
match it up to
somewhere.
my screen. Yeah, like right over there. Actually, right now it's kind of you can't kind of see it because my Peter Straub memorial collection is being displayed. But Peter Straub always shares a shelf for me with Ramsey Campbell,
Okay.
and I have a ton of old Ramsey Campbell books, and some of my like childhood copies of Ramsey
Wow.
Campbell are there, including the copy of The Parasite that I read at like 12 or 13, and all of even more so than the books themselves. All of these old books have my old bookmarks in them, and I
Wow.
used to use like Far Side day calendar, so it's like a
Yep.
Far Side comic a day, and I would fold it up and I would put it in the book, and then I would write either vocab that I wanted to learn on them or story ideas.
I'm like,
And my copy of The Parasite has my original bookmark in it, where there are story ideas for Mary written on them. Um, and I'll try and tell this anecdote concisely because it's a little complicated. But so there was the 13-year-old version of Mary that was just kind of vibes. And then in my 20s, I kind of reattacked it as a novel and got distracted because I was in my 20s. And then as in my early 30s, it was actually when we started that audio drama company, I wanted to break Mary as an audio drama.
oh,
So
okay.
I reattacked the story. This was as we were doing Steal the Stars.
Okay.
So Mac had been bringing in Steal the Stars. I started bringing in scripts for this audio version of Mary, and our format was going to kind of be consistent throughout stories. So we always wanted it to be like half-hour episodes and about 14 episodes long. So that's a fair amount of story to
Yeah.
have. And Mary, again, like was just kind of coming from a slightly plotless version of it. So I was like, shit, I gotta think of some cliffhangers that would actually like justify this having 30-minute episodes, and like
Right.
why would a listener come back and back and back? So I was trying to think of some good actual like radio drama cliffhangers, and I thought of one that I really liked, and I was like, oh, that would work really well. That'll get us like 2 or 3 episodes alone right there. And so I in the radio drama outline for Mary, I invented these plot twists. Cut to me now breaking the story again for novels, because I had to write an outline for Nightfire before I got my contract, and I worked off of the radio play outline, and so I kept that plot twist in there because I was like, I really like it. It seems to fit thematically.
Yeah.
I invented it for an audio drama, but it'll still work as a novel. While I was writing the book of Mary, the first draft of this final version of it, I touched base again with its inspiration. So I reread The Parasite, And again, my bookmark is still in there. And on that
I love
fucking
that.
bookmark is 12-year-old me having the same idea that I completely forgot about. So it has always been there of like, well, what if this happens? It just blew my mind to see it in writing of like this thing that I thought I pulled out of my ass for an audio drama version, very outside in,
Right.
just to get some more episodes, has actually always kind of been envisioned as part of this story. So I again, that just felt very like a nice feeling of like, oh, okay, this has always been what this story
Right.
wants
And it
to
sounds
be.
like you need to do a metafiction book next and
Yeah,
write
right.
write that story. I mean, that's crazy.
As long as I don't have to write Mary again, then I'll write whatever you want. Because one thing about novels in particular is, oh my God, you have to reread the same fucking thing over.
Yeah, I bet you're just like done with
I'm
it.
so done with it. Yeah, it's I can't say anything officially yet, but we're making headways as far as an adaptation for
Very exciting.
for Mary. Yeah, thank you. And in the negotiation process, my reps were asked if I wanted to write the adaptation, and I write screenplays and I write teleplays and stuff like that. But I was like, no, I don't need to write.
You're done. You're good.
Yeah, someone else can look at this material. I'm finished with it. But yeah, so those are probably my oldest books that I have, and then second oldest to that, besides like the ones that I like carried with me, are when I first moved to the city. My first job for several years, to basically supplement acting work, was I was a manager at Shakespeare and Company, the bookstore in the Village. And I was the receiving manager. So I was in control of, or in charge of like getting the shipments, unboxing them, checking the inventory, checking the condition and stuff like that. And so any book that was damaged, I could keep. Like we basically just had to like throw them out or yeah. There, I probably shouldn't admit this, but there were a few books that were maybe not.
I was say, yeah, maybe something got damaged in the few minutes between opening the box. And
right. Oh no, it fell. The spine is
ripped
dented
by accident. Yeah. No.
Oh, I'm so clumsy. Most of the time I was on the up and up, but there were a few books that
You're allowed to. Why not?
I was so poor too. Like I was making $7 an hour.
I know it's like the amount that it would take you to actually buy one of those would be like 3 hours of work. It's crazy. Please raise the minimum wage, government.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're listening to this.
whoever's in control,
yeah.
please listen to this podcast. Yeah, so like but through that job, like I also amassed just a ton of books, and that kind of kickstarted this New York leg of the collection. And then over the years, just as whenever I have like a depressive episode, or I'm just bummed about life or the fact that the sun has set at 6 p.m. Soon to be 4 p.m. Like buying books is just kind of my therapy. And so it's kind of grown, and it expands and contracts a little bit. I try and get rid of some, because I also like get a fair amount of advanced reader copies and stuff like that. And I try to, at least give up the ones that I know I probably won't reread anytime soon. But I, like you, also have a Kindle that is just, if it could take on physical weight, it would be as dense as a star. Like it is full of books. So like this doesn't even like scratch the collection I have in ebooks. And I kind of, for books that I really like, I kind of have to have all three versions of it: a hard copy, an audio copy, and an ebook copy, because I will want to read them usually twice, and I want to experience them as varied as I can. So like I want to see what the words look like on the page, but I'll also want to hear how they sound. And I'll
Are
also
you a
want
big audiobook listener?
Huge, yeah. I love audiobooks, and I tend to default to them now too, because like I don't know if it's like this in LA, but there's just so much commute time living in New York. Particularly pre-pandemic, but even now, like it's kind of getting back to how it used to be, of just like you're
Where's
spending an
everyone
hour.
going? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Right. Why are they going there at the same time? Uh,
I don't know. It's wild.
yeah. And I guess even when it's not a commute, but it's like, just doing household
Yeah, if
stuff.
you're like, you're waiting at the pharmacy or for a
Yeah.
doctor's appointment, like any moment of time. That's how I am about reading. Or yeah, I'm more of a
Yeah.
podcast listener than an audio. I'm not as into audiobooks. I have to like absorb it myself. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just hard for me. The only thing I like listening to audiobooks is like celebrity memoirs. Sometimes like if they've written it themselves and then I can hear their voice. But other than that, even if it's a really good audiobook, I'm just like, audio dramas though I'm into. I like podcasts. It's different.
Yeah, I was very similar for a while. I mean, I always was familiar with the Stephen King audiobooks because I would like go to sleep listening to them even as a little kid. So like those were always familiar with me, but like experiencing a book for the first time on audio, it used to be that like I could only do nonfiction that way for probably similar reasons. Like it was so performer dependent that when it was like a barrier would come between me and the material until I discovered doing it and I probably shouldn't admit this because I know a lot of audiobook narrators who would murder me for this. But once I started listening to things at 1.5 speed, that stopped being an issue for me. And I like just focused on the words and was able to like experience the novel as a novel a lot more. So I know exactly what you mean. Like audiobooks aren't for everybody. And for me they're almost more logistical in some ways.
No, I feel like most people, I mean, I'm happy if anyone's reading and if that's like the only way so the fact that you do all three, totally fine. If audiobooks are the only way people consume books, totally fine. I think for me, it's just the act of like absorbing the words, but I'm also a freak who can read while I have like a podcast on or while I have like a TV show on. I know I'm not going to absorb it the same way, but I mean, also depends what I'm reading. If it's like a more like fun sort of mindless read or TV, then it's the whole question of like, what is attention span and can we actually multitask? And that's like a whole other thing. But why do you think horror resonates with so many people? I mean, I struggle to answer this question myself as well. It's like why I'm drawn, because I've loved horror from a young age as well. And even though my parents didn't like not support it, they weren't like super into horror. I don't even know how I just kind of like fell into it. And I guess I've always loved it, even if it was more like Scooby-Doo or Nancy Drew from a younger age and then like evolving to more like serious stuff. But I've, even those like, is Elvis actually alive and a homeless person? Like not the crazy stuff where you're like, this is wild. Like, why, what's your take on why you think people are drawn to the darkness and drawn to horror?
I can go off at length on this subject, so reel me in whenever you need to.
Sure, yes.
Because I think about this all the time, and like for me, in the context in which I was raised, the atmosphere in which I was raised, like as someone who was raised by a horror obsessed, and she was obsessed with other genres too. She was big into like sci-fi and fantasy and stuff like that. She just like genre stories in general. But I like immediately gravitated towards horror. My brother went straight into like hard fantasy and sci-fi. So I think there is something that is just kind of hardwired in individuals to like really like these specific genres. But I think in general, I can kind of I'll try and address my personal and the kind of macro at the same time, because like I'm being very repetitive, but I was raised by a single working mom with MS. We're also Jewish, and like
same.
Yeah. I don't know if your lineage is similar or generation is similar, but like my mom was the daughter of Polish emigres who fled. So I guess that makes me second generation.
Yeah, it's like the trauma can be ingrained.
Right.
I fortunately, my family, both of there had actually immigrated to the U.S. prior to the Holocaust. But my boyfriend's grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, so he is second generation too. So yeah, I mean, it's still very real and very ingrained in our DNA and subconscious.
Yeah, and you probably similarly also just like kind of grow up with it as like
even if you don't, somebody else, or you just know that being, the anti-Semitic. I mean, look at what's happening in the world today. We don't need to get into it, but it's like anti-Semitism is still everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, which is like, that's heavy shit. Even without the Holocaust, like all of our holidays are like, well, there's another time where someone tried to wipe us out. Have fun, everybody.
But
So
Merry
like
Christmas.
yeah,
But Merry.
exactly. I wish we had that. Even fucking Hanukkah's about like, well, there was a war and we had to
I
hide
know, right?
in a cave. But like, incidentally, my next book that's coming out next year is a very explicitly Jewish horror story
Very
for those
interesting.
reasons. Yeah.
Is it about a golem or no? It takes
No, it's about vampires, and so it's about
oh
how
my God,
vampire tropes and anti-Semitic tropes are kind of the same thing.
Wait, that sounds. I love vampires too. So that sounds fascinating.
I'm very excited about it. But so like zooming out a little bit, like as you know, like just growing up with like the specter of the Holocaust affects you, and then adding to that, the sexism my mom had to deal with, and just the fact that she had a degenerative disease that was going to take her from us way too soon. Like that's really heavy shit to live with as a kid and to try and understand. And horror for me and genre stuff in general for her, I think were very much filters and lenses through which we could like kind of acclimate ourselves to these really heavy concepts like genocide or body decay and things like that. Like it's in some ways horror is kind of a coping mechanism. In some ways it's kind of a practice round. In some ways it's also kind of a relief, because like as bad as the shit we're dealing with, like at least we're not running from that thing.
Right. We're not turning into a fly. Like that still
like
terrifies.
Yeah. And so like it works on a number of levels, because you can watch Jeff Goldblum decay, and you can also understand that I too will decay. Not like that, but like decay is part of having a body.
Right.
But also, thank God it's not like that. But also it's kind of fun, and like it makes your own decay seem a little less hard to wrap your mind around.
Right.
So like it operates on a number of levels. And I think even if people don't have that kind of capital T traumatic atmosphere to deal with, there's a reason why like our earliest stories are just kind of as a species are monster stories and are scary stories and are about, Grendel or, the various like Greek and Roman myths, or even just like the cave paintings are about like the hunt and this, this thing that could have gone horribly.
Yeah, us versus them too.
The monster in the darkness and stuff like that.
The unknown too, just like as the monster, right?
Yeah. We are the only animal that we know of that is aware we are going to die, and like we walk around with that all the time
from the minute you're born, basically.
And we all probably figure it out around childhood when we first like encounter death, like
in one way or another. Whether it's a Disney, even like Disney movies, you show it to a kid at the wrong time and it can be too many questions.
Bambi will fuck you up. And like, we still manage to be very solipsistic in a lot of ways. Like we don't always think about what it will be like for our self to die, but that knowledge is always there. And we're expected to like go to work and like pay a bill and stuff like that. And while we're still just like, I'm going to fucking die one day. Like, I'm going to die. And we know what other galaxies look like. We know what the fucking atom looks like. We have split the atom. We can see things at like a multi microscopic level. We still have no idea what happens to us after we die. No idea at all. So like that is also really heavy shit to walk around with all the time. And I think horror has always kind of been this dark horse storytelling trope, the horrific, just kind of as a genre device, as a storytelling device, has been with us for, since the beginning. I think for those reasons, because we do have to confront it. We can compartmentalize like fucking champs as a species, but like we still need to like put that stuff somewhere.
Right. Only so, and then that leads, to further issues the more we compartmentalize it too. So it's like, we can't really win no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. It's rough. It's rough being alive.
I know. It's like the burden of humanity. It's like everything you just said. It's like what people have, been trying to grapple with. You said since mankind or humankind. And it's like, I don't think we'll ever really know the answer.
Right. Right. So I think horror just kind of as a genre scratches that itch in a lot of different ways. Sometimes very specifically, like you can. I always love to like track kind of trends and like what's going on in a culture at a given time and why do these trends start to happen. So sometimes you can get really specific, and sometimes it's as simple as just like I'm scared of death.
Yeah.
And like, I have to live with that. So I want to read this book to kind of, I think there is something also interesting. And I deal with this a lot because like my wife hates horror. She hates it. And she hates horror the way I hate roller coasters. And I think they serve similar purposes. I think roller coasters kind of do the physical version of the intellectual itch that horror scratches. And like, I get no enjoyment out of roller coasters, even thinking of the catharsis they might bring. Like I get no enjoyment out of it.
Okay.
And she's like that with horror a lot of the time. I wrestle sometimes with why that is, and like what does that mean? What does that mean about horror? Is horror for everybody? No, I don't think so. It is. But she'll still be drawn to like really dark stuff. And like, so I think that like, we have these like little, kind of taboos and things that we can't deal with. And then these things that, still kind of get at it in an indirect way, which I also find very, very fascinating, kind of struggling to square those circles.
No, I could keep talking to you for hours. You kept that pretty concise at like, I think under 10 minutes. So pretty good. I think but you're so eloquent. You're a man of many words, but words with meaning and thought. And I think, you can tell from a young age, clearly you were meant to be doing what you're doing. I look very much forward to your next book, where I'm very excited. We will link below where everyone can get Mary. We'll make sure that everyone keeps in touch with you and follows you. And until next time, everyone, stay reading. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you.
Bye.